Okay, let's unpack this. As humans, we're driven by so much more than just our basic needs, aren't we? There's this deep, almost irresistible urge to discover, to understand, to feel something profound about the world around us. Today, we're diving deep into three of the most powerful, yet often misunderstood human experiences: awe, curiosity, and wonder. We've taken a stack of fascinating sources, from scientific reviews on childhood development to neurological insights and, yeah, philosophical explorations, really, to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge for you.
And what's fascinating here is how these concepts, while distinct, they really intertwine to shape our learning, our well-being, and even our evolution. So our mission in this deep dive is to explore their definitions, their biological underpinnings, their impact on our lives from infancy all the way to old age, and even, well, their surprising complexities and potential downsides.
Yeah, exactly. By the end of this deep dive, you'll gain a unique understanding of these essential human drivers and maybe get some surprising facts that just might make you see your own experiences in a totally new light. All right, let's start with awe. It's a word we use constantly, but how do we truly define it? Is it just wonder or something more profound?
That's a great starting point. Awe is often compared to wonder, but it's typically described as less purely joyous. It seems to carry a deeper, almost overwhelming intensity. Think of Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, the one that visually maps how emotions relate. On that model, awe is often positioned as a combination of surprise and fear.
Surprise and fear.
Yeah.
Interesting combination.
Mm-hmm. One dictionary defines it as an overwhelming feeling of reverence, admiration, fear, etc., produced by that which is grand, sublime, or extremely powerful.
Okay.
Another refers to it as a mixed emotion of reverence, respect, dread, and wonder inspired by authority, genius, great beauty, sublimity, or might, citing things like the works of Bach or even the destructive power of a weapon.
So it's usually directed at something perceived as truly vast or more powerful than ourselves, like the Grand Canyon, the immense scale of the cosmos, maybe a deity. Can you give us some more examples that highlight this scale?
Absolutely. Think about standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. Yeah. Or gazing up at the Milky Way on a clear night. These are experiences that inherently make us feel small, right? They compel us to shift our usual frame of reference. Neuropsychologist Paul Pearsall even calls it the 11th emotion.
The 11th emotion, wow.
Yeah, defining awe as and researchers like Monroy and Keltner, who are really important in this field, they define awe for research purposes as involving two key things: perceived vastness and a need for accommodation. That is, a need to fundamentally shift one's mentality or usual frame of reference to really grasp what they're experiencing.
That's a fascinating linguistic twist, too. The very word awe actually stems from the Old English word edge, meaning terror, dread, and potentially from the Greek akos, meaning pain. That makes a lot of sense when you consider how words like awesome and awful also came from awe, with awful originally meaning something quite dreadful, not just bad.
Exactly, the roots are quite revealing.
Okay, so we've got awe. Now let's turn to curiosity. We observe it so vividly in children, but what exactly is that deep drive?
Well, curiosity is essentially the desire for new experiences and learning, or you could call it an appetite for acquiring new knowledge. From a biological perspective, it's considered a basic drive in primates, a kind of motivational force that helps us solve problems and adapt to new environments. And we see it in other species, too, like dogs, elephants, monkeys.
Right.
Which suggests it has a genetic basis and, importantly, an intrinsic reward system shared among many mammals. Our brains are literally wired to generate intrinsic rewards that assign value to learning itself.
So our brains find learning inherently rewarding. That's huge. How do researchers categorize different types of curiosity?
Good question. They generally distinguish between two main facets: perceptual curiosity and epistemic curiosity.
Perceptual and epistemic.
Okay. Perceptual curiosity is the most basic type. It's a drive for increased sensory perception of an object, like an infant grasping and tasting everything they can get their hands on.
Yeah, I see that with my nephew all the time.
Exactly. It's observed in both humans and animals. Epistemic curiosity, on the other hand, relates to a more intellectual search for knowledge through questioning and thinking. While even very young children experience it, it's harder to observe directly since they can't always articulate what they're seeking,
Makes sense.
And curiosity can also be specific about a particular stimulus or diverse, reflecting more of a general personality trait of being prone to curiosity.
All right, let's bring wonder into the picture now.
Yeah.
How does it relate to or maybe differ from curiosity and awe?
Okay, wonder. While much of the research on curiosity comes from biology and psychology, wonder largely emerges from philosophy.
Ah, philosophy.
Yes. One definition describes wonder as a mode of consciousness in which we experience what we perceive or are contemplating as strange, beyond our powers of comprehension, yet worthy of our attention for its own sake. It's often seen as a kind of counterweight to educational cultures that sometimes favor very specific ways of learning, with a heavy emphasis on just finding the correct answer.
Right, getting the grade versus exploring.
Precisely. Wonder instead is believed to foster empathy, imagination, and a deeper love of nature and the world.
So it's not just an intellectual pursuit then. It sounds like it has a broader, more holistic connection to us.
Exactly right. Wonder connects us not only intellectually, but also emotionally, aesthetically, and existentially. Children are particularly attracted to wonder because it links with positive feelings. Think of the phrase wonder at something, like being struck by beauty or mystery and just left speechless. Then there's wondering about something which is more inquisitive, similar to curiosity.
Okay.
But the key difference is the wonder often remains even after an explanation, urging a deeper understanding, not just an answer. Surprise is often an optimal starting point for both curiosity and wonder, but it can lead to different types of engagement. Curiosity is the drive to investigate, find the answer. Wonder is more of a state of mind, a feeling with a strong aesthetic dimension, a kind of lingering appreciation.
Okay, now that we've sort of clearly distinguished awe, curiosity, and wonder, let's explore why these experiences are so fundamental to us. What's happening in our brains that makes us crave them?
Right, this is where novelty comes right into the center. At its core, our brain's fascinating response to anything new is a primary driver. Research shows most mammals, especially humans, naturally prefer novelty, provided, of course, it doesn't pose a perceived threat.
Okay.
You see it in simple ways. Rats explore new maze sections, children gravitate to new toys. The reason is actually pretty simple. Novelty makes us happy.
Happy? How so?
Well, a rush of dopamine accompanies fresh experiences. Studies show these pleasure centers in the midbrain get activated, releasing a flood of dopamine. Now, this granted us a huge evolutionary advantage. Learning was absolutely necessary for adaptation.
Okay.
And this attraction to novelty-motivated exploration, which was rewarded with dopamine, ultimately increasing survival chances. It even helps explain how humans managed to spread across the entire world.
So this isn't just about feeling good for a moment. It's a deep, ancient biological imperative shaping every interaction we have. From scrolling through social media to choosing a new career path, maybe. It literally dictates our survival and growth.
Exactly, and this isn't just some theoretical concept. Think about the direct link to memory, why those out-of-the-ordinary events stick with us so vividly. It's that dopamine signal, hardwired to mark new learning as important. Without that novel stimulus, maintaining long-term interest in anything, let alone sparking creativity and innovation, becomes incredibly difficult.
Let's dive deeper into curiosity's neural mechanisms then. You mentioned brains finding learning rewarding. How exactly does that mechanism work, and what does it tell us about our natural desire to learn?
Okay, so studies using fMRI, that's functional magnetic resonance imaging, which lets us see brain activity in real time, show that certain brain areas light up when people report feeling curious. Specifically, areas associated with reward anticipation, like the caudate nucleus, and cognitive control, like the inferior frontal gyrus.
Reward anticipation.
Yes. This suggests curiosity itself elicits an anticipation of a reward state, which is perfectly consistent with something called the information gap theory.
Information gap theory.
Yeah, this theory basically posits that curiosity is a cognitive-induced deprivation that arises from the perception of a gap in knowledge and understanding, like an itch you need to scratch.
So if we have a gap in our knowledge, our brain treats the potential information to fill that gap like a reward. That's a really fascinating concept. Can you expand on how our brain processes that? What does the research show about how strong that reward feeling is?
It's precisely that. Research by Kang and colleagues found curiosity is actually highest when you have some idea about an answer, but you lack confidence. It forms a kind of U-shaped function of confidence.
A U-shape. Not just the less I know, the more curious I am.
Not quite. It's that sweet spot of knowing enough to know you don't know, but feeling an answer is attainable. And get this. People are even willing to pay for information in these circumstances just to close that knowledge gap.
Wow. Pay for the answer.
Yeah, and this research also clearly shows that curiosity significantly enhances learning, especially when your initial guesses turn out to be incorrect. It strongly suggests its primary function really is to facilitate learning.
Okay, what about awe? Does it also have an evolutionary why? What are the scientific insights into its biological role?
There are theories, yes. Evolutionary theories suggest awe might have originated from the feelings low-status individuals had in the presence of powerful, high-status people, sort of reinforcing social hierarchies.
Like deference.
Kind of. This primordial awe then generalized, the theory goes, to any stimulus that is both vast and requires us to fundamentally change our mental understanding of the world. Another theory, which actually has more empirical support, suggests awe draws our attention away from the self and towards the environment.
Okay, less self-focus.
Right, helping us build informational resources when faced with novel, complex stimuli. This would have been adapted for survival by increasing systematic, accommodative processing, basically, helping us take in and integrate new, important information more effectively. These shifts in neurophysiology are key to its impact.
So what this all really means is that these emotions, awe, curiosity, wonder, they aren't just fleeting feelings. They're deeply ingrained biological drivers that relentlessly push us to learn, adapt, and interact with our world in pretty profound ways. It sounds like these capacities are there right from the very beginning of life. How does curiosity, for example, develop and manifest in children?
It seems humans are basically born with intellectual curiosity, and the way parents react to children's questions can significantly increase or decrease this innate curiosity.
How so?
Well, constantly negative reactions, shutting down questions, that discourages further questioning, while positive, engaging reactions naturally encourage them. For infants specifically, a key challenge is what researchers call the sampling problem.
Sampling problem.
Yeah, how do they select useful information from their overwhelmingly rich environment? They do have some innate biases, like orienting towards faces or high contrast areas, which helps.
That raises an important question then. How do infants know what to pay attention to from all that incoming data? It must be overwhelming.
This leads to something really interesting called the Goldilocks effect.
Ah, like the porridge. Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. Infants actually prefer stimuli that are optimally discrepant, meaning not too simple, stuff they've already mastered, and not too complex, things that are just too hard to understand yet.
So they go for the just right level of newness.
Precisely. They're least likely to look away from events that have an intermediate information content. It means they naturally try to maintain an intermediate rate of information absorption. It's like they instinctively know what's just right for their current learning stage.
It's remarkable how children, just through their play, seem to mirror the scientific method, constantly testing hypotheses, seeking out causal structures.
Absolutely. Children actively structure their play to reduce uncertainty and discover how things work. You see it all the time. They prefer to play with toys that violate their expectations, things that surprise them, and they explore more when they're not explicitly given full instructions on how something works.
They want to figure it out themselves.
Exactly. This hypothesis testing behavior is really well attested in the research. Children effectively design and select informative interventions actions to figure out unclear causal mechanisms, just like little scientists running experiments.
This focus on curiosity and wonder in early learning seems absolutely critical then. What about its broader impact, say, on academic performance later on?
Well, the data shows intellectual curiosity is positively correlated with academic performance. Its impact is similar in strength to factors like general intelligence and conscientiousness.
That's significant.
It is. And if you look historically, civilizations that fostered high intellectual curiosity, think about the European scientific revolution. For example, they also saw truly significant scientific progress. There seems to be a link there.
And awe. Does it contribute to our well-being beyond just that momentary feeling of being impressed?
Oh, it contributes significantly. Awe is quite a unique emotional state, actually comprising maybe 8 to 10 distinct positive feelings. And it involves 5 key processes that are linked directly to well-being. Shifts in neurophysiology, a diminished focus on the self, we talked about that.
Right, less self-focus.
Increased prosocial relationality, basically, feeling more connected and positive towards others. Greater social integration. And heightened sense of meaning in life.
Wow, that's a lot.
It really is.
Yeah.
It fosters optimism and connection while actively reducing feelings of anxiety, depression, and even social rejection. It reshapes our self-perception and deepens our feelings of meaning. And its social consequences are interesting, too. It includes an increased perception of time availability.
Makes time feel like it expands.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And a greater willingness to donate time to help others, though interestingly, not necessarily money. It also increases systematic processing, making us less susceptible to weak arguments, more thoughtful,
So, if these emotions are so clearly beneficial, why do teachers sometimes struggle to promote them, especially in subjects like science, where you'd think they'd thrive?
That's a really important point. A systematic review found that while curiosity is often acknowledged as important by educators, very few studies explicitly define it or discuss how to actually observe and nurture it beyond just assuming it's naturally present.
So they know it's good, but not how to foster it.
Often, yes. Many studies focus heavily on learning outcomes, the test scores, rather than the process of curiosity or wonder itself. And teachers often report lacking specific knowledge or strategies on how to promote curiosity effectively. Plus, a strong focus on finding the single right answer rather than exploring the learning process can, unfortunately, make children less curious as they get older.
Oh, that's counterproductive.
It can be. It might even foster what's known as a fixed mindset, the idea that intelligence is fixed rather than something you can grow. However, the flip side is encouraging. When teachers purposefully evoke wonder, studies show students demonstrate increased content learning and retention.
That's hopeful.
Definitely. And what's truly compelling here, connecting back to long-term well-being, is that research suggests neophilia, that's the desire for novel experiences, is a strong predictor of longevity.
Longevity.
Yes. People who actively seek out new experiences throughout their life tend to live happier, healthier lives and maintain better memory and learning skills well into their late 90s.
We've explored the incredible benefits and profound impacts of these drives, from learning to longevity. But is there a potential downside here? Can we have too much of a good thing when it comes to awe, curiosity, and wonder, or novelty?
That's a crucial question, and yes, there are complexities. While these drives are incredibly adaptive and beneficial, the very mechanisms that make them so powerful also carry certain risks. For example, we touched on awe. While it's often tied to religion, it can also be a profoundly secular experience. There's even this concept called aweism, discussing how atheists can experience deep awe, and that the feeling itself doesn't inherently make one religious. Writers like Phil Zuckerman and Elaine de Botton have explored how secular institutions and experiences, art, nature, science, can inspire awe just as powerfully. And historically, this isn't new. Awe has been studied way back in ancient Greece and Mesopotamia. They had terms like eidos, which was reverence mixed with shame, sebas, referring to sacred awe, and melamu, an awe-inspiring aura around gods and kings.
So the power of awe is ancient.
Absolutely. It shows that the social and maybe pro-social capacity of awe is a concept deeply rooted across human history and cultures. But getting to your point about downsides...
Yeah, the too much of a good thing part.
Yes, it is possible to be too much of a neophiliac. Anyone can potentially become addicted to that intense dopamine rush associated with novelty.
Addicted to novelty.
Think about it. In our modern information age, with constant accessibility through computers and cell phones, it can unfortunately lead to bona fide addictions. People endlessly clicking or scrolling for the next little information fix, which starts interfering with life's progress and overall well-being. Other experiential addictions, like, say, gaming addiction, can arise from very similar patterns of chasing that novel reward signal over and over.
Okay, so we absolutely need novelty, but we also need balance. That makes sense. What happens then if we swing the other way and lack sufficient novelty in our lives?
Right. Without sufficient novel experiences, people simply cannot maintain interest in things long term. They become bored, unmotivated, especially if new challenges aren't offered. And they find creativity and innovation practically impossible. It leads to what you could pretty accurately describe as stagnation, a real absence of the growth and engagement that these drives typically foster.
Stagnation. That sounds bleak.
It's not ideal for thriving. The best use of novelty seems to require what some call novelty within novelty.
Novelty within novelty.
Yeah, meaning don't return too often to the exact same source of novelty, try to vary it, and always balance the search for the new with necessary routines and responsibilities. It's really about using these powerful drives to fulfill your potential and overcome fears, not just to endlessly chase fleeting stimulation without direction.
So wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for you, the listener? We've journeyed through the intricate definitions, the powerful evolutionary and neurological roots, and the profound impact of awe, curiosity, and wonder on everything from learning and mental health to even longevity. These aren't just abstract concepts, are they?
Not at all. They are vital components of what it means to be human, constantly driving our exploration and growth. We've seen how they shape us right from our earliest moments, how they can be nurtured or, unfortunately, sometimes stifled, and how a lack of them can indeed lead to that feeling of stagnation. Understanding these forces within ourselves, hopefully, can empower you to cultivate richer experiences and deeper learning in your own life.
Definitely. So for your final thought to mull over, consider a routine in your life, whether it's at work or maybe at home that feels a bit stagnant. How might introducing just a little bit of that discrepant novelty, something new but not overwhelmingly challenging, or maybe taking a deliberate moment of wonder at something familiar you often overlook, how might that unlock a new layer of curiosity and reignite your own internal drive?